Hi, and welcome to the FinOps Advocate YouTube channel. I'm Mark Sanaka, and this week we're going to go over how to conduct a FinOps assessment. Last week, we took a look at the results of a worldwide survey done by the FinOps organization, and what we found was that two-thirds of the respondents indicated they were in the crawl phase of their FinOps practice. 25% said they were in the walk, and less than 8% said they were in the run phase. So I thought today what we do is go over how to conduct an assessment, why it's important, how to increase the frequency of doing that assessment, and touch upon some of the best practices that I've learned in the industry. So I hope this is helpful to you, and let's get started. Assessment is important to you as an executive as it will give you visibility across your FinOps practice. Cloud is much more complex than the data center. The charges are variable, and there are many of them. So it's important that your financial management reflects this change. You're going to want to have a standardized process that has measurable targets that can be repeated. Eventually, you're going to go from a manual effort to an automated KPI dashboard that gives your stakeholders, or what we call personas, constant feedback. So as you'll see in this video, you'll have a number of different options in setting up your assessment process. But essentially, it comes down to measuring, monitoring, operating, and iterating. FinOps is no different than any of the other cloud disciplines in that it is iterative. The assessment is part of the inform phase. What you learn from your assessment, you'll use to optimize. You'll then run that optimized configuration, and you'll start again with the assessment. Now, when you begin, your assessment might be annual. You'll move, as you mature, you might move to semi-annual or quarterly. Eventually, you'll get to that automated KPI dashboard that gives people constant feedback. What we're doing in the cloud is a lot more complicated than what Henry Ford did with his assembly line. Our software assembly line actually requires that we change constantly, whereas with Henry Ford, once the Model T ran off the assembly line, he was done. Sure, it's going to be more complicated for us as we tighten our iterative loop of inform, optimize, and operate. But moving from an annual self-assessment to quarterly to automating KPIs that continuously are provided to our stakeholders will allow us to accelerate our continuous improvement. Okay, so what are our options in conducting these assessments? Well, you can work with your platform vendor. You can reach out to tools companies or consultancies, or you can do it yourself. There are pluses and minuses for each. Now, if you decide to work with your platform vendor, obviously it's going to be platform specific, and they can give you some real good insights as far as some of the technical merits of what you're doing. But you can, and a lot of times your account rep can arrange for this, and a lot of times they'll do this for free. This is a great starting point. And one that I've done in the past. It is not evidence-based typically. It's simply a questionnaire that they walk you through, and you assess where you are in the process. You can also go to the tools companies themselves, and a lot of times they will provide an assessment for you, either for free or they'll require a fee, which if you then go on to purchase their product, can be rolled up into the purchase price. Obviously, they have a dog in the fight as far as you selecting their tool, but this can be a very fast way to get your assessment underway. Next is to look towards consultancies. So the benefit here is many of these consultancies have done this assessment for other companies in your industry and outside your industry. And so um, a lot of times they can provide you some perspective. And most of the time it's going to be evidence-based because it's going to be a more thorough assessment of where you are in the process. And last but not least is the self-assessment. Now, this is good in as much as you're going to control the process and you're going to be able to improve upon the process. You might use one of those other three approaches to get started, but the sooner you can get to a process whereby you're controlling it in-house and you are tightening the iterative loop at the frequency at which you're doing your assessments, and then eventually automating it, which is your ultimate goal. This gives you more control and is a little bit more difficult to do, but is very beneficial. So let's take a look at a self-assessment, one which provides what I believe to be some of the best practices that I've seen thus far. This is the FinOps Foundation assessment tool. It's currently in beta as of May 2023. It's been in development for about a year. And for those members who have registered for the beta, we're in the process of testing it, providing feedback, those sorts of things. But I thought it would be a good example of what's shaping up to be a pretty good assessment tool. So you start your assessment. You're going to name it, in this case, Test Assessment by the FinOps Advocate. You're going to be asked to pick 6 out of the many framework capabilities. I've already selected 6, data ingestion, forecasting, education, anomalies, shared cost, and management commitments. You'll then be asked to set your target scores. Now, when you put in your current capabilities, you will be measured against those target scores. Those target scores, you can adjust them going forward, but it's something that you might want to set for the next quarter, for the next year, and then watch as you progress towards that target. So for today's example, I will be setting the target scores for the end of 2023. Many of my current scores will not meet those targets, obviously, but it will be a fixed target that I'm using to measure myself for the remainder of this year. I've now set my maturity levels on each of my framework disciplines. And you can see a pattern developing. I'm expecting to have primarily full knowledge by the end of this year. Our processes are between 2 and 3. Our metrics are also between 2 and 3. Adoption, we're not expecting to get that much penetration. So for the most part, except for education, we're expecting to just get initial standards, and automation, not expecting too much, except again for education, where we're hoping to automate things a little bit. So we've set our targets. Now we're going to set our current capabilities. Here we have each of the sections. Now, this is an evidence-based assessment. So we have the opportunity to both post what we feel is our current capabilities, and then we can also post evidence in each of these areas. So data ingestion and normalization as far as knowledge is concerned. Our current assessment is that we have partial knowledge. Remember, we've set our target to have full knowledge. We feel as though right now we have partial, and we would put in evidence to that effect. And we would post information there and save that. Once we've done that, the that little section that has a document goes gray. Okay, so working with the various personas, finance, engineering, the business, together we assessed our maturity in each of these target disciplines. And this is the result of our self-assessment. What our current score is versus what we're expecting to be at the end of this calendar year 2023. Where we are in progress percentage-wise, those areas that we're doing well in, we see in amber, we're about 50% there. Anything that we're lagging is in red. And if we were well on our way to meeting our goals, you'd see those items in green. So what I like about this tool is, first of all, it's a self-assessment, so you have control over the process. You're able to set targets. There are standards available to you, both in the framework and in the lens of each of the metrics. It allows you to track your progress on maturity over time. You'll want to certainly get everyone's input when you're filling out this assessment, and then repeat it at very least annually, if not semi-annual or perhaps quarterly. So now that we've taken a look at a good example of a self-assessment, I just wanted to step back and go over the personas, because I've mentioned them a few times. From the FinOps organization, they've described personas, which it's important that each of them participate in an assessment. And you, the executive, your responsibility is making sure everybody is aware of the importance and that everybody is collaborating. The business product owner is the one who can determine the trade-offs between time to market and cost of development, testing, and ultimately production delivery. Your finance department's most interested in forecasting and budgeting. Your engineering is a combination of your cloud infrastructure as well as your application engineers. And lastly, procurement is involved in application licensing, and also could be involved in the commitment of services. I've included here 2 pages that have the list of the different frameworks that you may want to consider for inclusion in your self-assessment. I'm not going to go over each of these, but I wanted to include them here in case you wanted to print them out and have them available. Now, we all know that FinOps is much more than cost optimization, but it is where FinOps started, and it is arguably still the most important aspect of FinOps. In this year, 2023, the cloud spend has been rated as the #1 cloud challenge, even ahead of security. I think a lot of people now feel more comfortable with security, and they are focusing on cloud spend. Flexera, who has been doing this for the last 12 years, has done this survey again, and last year the participants identified 33% of their spend as what they believed to be wasted resources. That went down to 28% this year. But what I'm getting at is cost optimization is still the anchor of your FinOps. And so it's so essential that I think that you break out another assessment for cost optimization itself. And that will really be for the engineering department. It is giving them the tools to do an assessment of how effective they are using the cloud native configurations, the cost optimization best practices. If they're given the information, they can assess themselves, and more times than not, they will cut down on those costs. And there are many tricks and techniques available. And what I like to do is to have a checklist that I give to the application engineers as well as the cloud infrastructure engineers of things that they should consider and should review to make sure that they're taking advantage of all of those things which are appropriate based on the organizational needs. Now, different companies have different needs. Some have legal requirements that others don't. Some have performance requirements and sustainability issues. So, it drilling down into the cost optimization self-assessment does not make sense to be included into the larger FinOps organization self-assessment. But I do believe that it's important to provide this checklist to your engineers so that they can, as I said, do the right thing. Now, we all want to progress our FinOps discipline, deliver cloud-based services in the most cost-effective manner possible. One of the key ways of doing that is to have an effective manual assessment to start with, and then eventually automating that as much as possible to be as efficient as possible. Here is a list of actionable takeaways for you. If you haven't already done an assessment, use one of those 4 options and get it done. You as the executive, it's your job to make sure that each of these personas are taking care of their areas of responsibility. You're going to want to make sure that everybody is aware that this is an important function because it will make you more agile and more cost effective. And then recognize those teams that have made improvements. That's always key. And eventually, you're going to want to automate this effort to tighten that iterative loop and make it more effective. Hi, Mark Sinaka here, the FinOps Advocate. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. Thanks.